We are doing exercise 5G, and in this video I'll be doing question 3D, which says find the inverse function of each of the following. State the domain and range of the inverse of f. Here is f, here is my domain, my codomain, and f of x is equal to the square root of 1 minus x. Now this question is asking two things of us. We need to find the inverse function, and we need to find the domain and range. And as you can see, I've broken it down into those two steps. We will first find the inverse function, and then we'll find the domain and range. So let's begin with finding the inverse function. And as you can see here, I've written down the steps we need to follow. So this is kind of like our recipe to find the inverse function. So let's begin with step 1. Let y equal f of x. So f of x equals the square root of 1 minus x. So therefore, I could say y equals the square root of 1 minus x. Let me give that a tick. Next, I will switch my x's with y's. So now I'm going to switch my x's and y's. So that means I'll be left with x here equals the square root of 1 minus y. Let's give that a tick. Next, I'm going to rearrange to make y the subject. So at the moment, x is my subject, so let me do some rearranging. I'm going to square both sides to get rid of this square root. So I'm going to get x squared equals 1 minus y. To make y the subject now, I'm going to do a nifty little trick, which is I'm going to plus y to both sides and minus x squared to both sides. So I'm going to be left with this. So now y is my subject. Let me give that a tick. The final thing that we need to do is equate the new expression to the inverse of f. So that means I'm going to get the inverse of f is equal to 1 minus x squared. And that's your answer for the first part. We now need to figure out what my domain and range of the inverse is going to be. And the best way to do this is by first figuring out what the domain and range of my f will be. So what is my domain of f? Well, that's given to us. It's restricted. It's between 0 and 1. So 0 and 1. Now, this restricted domain is going to impact what my range is going to be. So my restricted domain will impact what my range will be. And the best way to go about this now is by doing a quick sketch. And that's going to enable us to figure out what our range will be. So let me look here. So we have y equals the square root of 1 minus x. Now, this minus in front of my x tells me that it's going to be a square root graph that's going this way. And this 1 here is telling me it's going to be shifted 1 in the positive x direction, like that. But let's say you're having a bit of difficulty figuring that out. Well, if you wanted to find the x-intercept, what do? Well, you'd say the x-intercept is going to occur when y equals 0. So I'm going to go 0 equals the square root of 1 minus x. I will square both sides to get rid of this square root. So I'll be left with 0 equals 1 minus x. I'll then plus x to both sides, and I've got x equals 1. So it's going to be here. Not too hard at all. So now let me give this a sketch. So it's going to be like that, and this is f. Perfect. Now, my domain is restricted between 0 and 1. So here is 0, and here is 1. So it's only going to exist between here and here, which means this part of the graph isn't going to exist. It's only going to exist from here to here. So to figure out what my range is going to be, I'm going to have to figure out what my y-intersection point is going to be, my y-intercept. So to find my y-intercept, I let x equal 0. So I go y equals the square root of 1 minus 0, which will leave me with y equals the square root of 1. The square root of 1 is 1. So that means this is 1. So my range is from 0 to 1. 0 to 1. 0 to 1. Now we've found my domain of f and my range of f. We know that the domain of f is going to be the range of the inverse, and we know that the range of f will be the domain of the inverse. Hopefully I said that right. But as you can see, it's going to switch. So this will be 0, 1, and this will be 0, 1. So they're actually the same. Perfect. The question doesn't ask us to sketch it. We simply did this to make it a bit more clearer. And we don't have to sketch the inverse of f. But as you can imagine, if we were to find the inverse across y equals x, it's actually going to look pretty much the same as that. But we don't have to sketch it, so let's not. There are your answers. Hopefully this was helpful in answering question 3D of exercise 5G.